In this video, we're going to cover the 7 primitive data types in JavaScript. Primitive data types are the simplest kind of data, and they store just one piece of information and are immutable. So that means you can't change their actual value. So I want to go ahead and touch on each of these 7, and we can hop into Visual Studio Code and discuss each one by one in my notes file. The first one we have is number, and that's going to represent numbers like 42 or numbers with decimals like 3.14. We've got bigint. Bigint is going to be for very large integers beyond the number limits. We have string, and that's going to be text that's wrapped in quotes, single or double quotes. You have boolean, which is true or false values. You have undefined, which is essentially it's a variable declared but not assigned a value. That's going to be that default undefined. And then we have null, which is the absence of value, no value or empty. And then the last one we have is symbol. And this is going to be, for, unique or secret keys for, object properties. So those are the 7. Now I want to go through each one as an example. So the first example we have is number. And this is going to be, example, we have let price equals 30. We are declaring a variable with the number 30. And then we're console.logging that price plus 10, and then that output's going to get 40. In example 2, we're using bigint. And with bigint, we are, storing that big, large number. And so that's going to be this example here, let big number equal this humongous number that ends in n. So the difference between bigint and number is bigint has n at the end, and then we're console.logging big number plus 1n to increase that value. Example 3, we have a string, and like I mentioned, strings are wrapped in quotes, and in this case we're using double quotes, so we're declaring a variable, assigning it to a string, and then console.logging hello plus world in the browser. Example 4, we have a boolean. And with a boolean, we have declaring a variable again. We're setting it to true. We could also set it to false. So if it's sunny, then we're going to console.log let's go outside, and that's going to be in the console within the browser. Example 5, we are using undefined. Now with undefined, we are declaring a variable here, let favorite color, but we're not assigning it any value. And so if we were to console.log that variable, it's going to come out with undefined in the console, in the browser. Example 6, we're using null. Null is going to be, representing no value or empty. So we're saying essentially this toy, this variable of toy is assigned a value of null. So it's, there's no toy, it's just an empty value. And then example 7, we have a symbol, and a symbol is going to be a secret value or unique value key for object properties. And so here's this example. We've got a secret key declaring a variable assigned to a symbol, and we're calling it secret. And then within a user object that's denoted by the curly braces, we're saying the user is named Alice, and then we're giving it the key, secret key, and then the value is my secret value, and we are then console.logging that secret key, which is going to come out as that value. So those are the 7 primitive data types in JavaScript. I wanted to also give some examples in everyday settings you might be using this for your website or a project you might be working on, just so you have a better idea of how these are used in the real world. So for numbers, this is first example here, we can use numbers for tracking subscription prices, storing user ratings, and calculating discounts. For big integers, that's going to be more in mathematics and science. So it's going to be huge numbers like handling user IDs, huge user IDs, or recording blockchain transaction numbers. So really large input data types. Next, we have string. And with string, it's going to be, strings are used all the time, whether it's, usernames and passwords, storing blog titles and content, that's going to be strings. You got search queries, you have customer messages, all of that's going to be strings in JavaScript. Then we have booleans, and booleans are, really useful for instance, checking if a user's logged in, enabling or disabling features, tracking subscription statuses, or showing or hiding some UI element you want to display in your application or your website. For undefined, this is going to be pretty useful for debugging. It's going to be also that default value, so declaring a variable, declaring a function, by default it's going to be undefined, and then it's going to, if you want to debug as well, it's going to be useful for any debugging that you plan on doing. With null, some examples are, clearing out data. So specifically, like if you want to delete some posts or comments, you're going to set it to null. Essentially, like null is, wiping out some sort of data, indicating an empty profile picture, clearing user data on logout. Using null can be very effective in those types of applications. And then lastly, with symbols, an example that we could use is, storing private user IDs inside an object, like we're somewhat doing here in a way. Hiding internal metadata in blog posts, creating private methods in classes. So those are all the examples, or the 7 primitive data types that we covered. Just want to give a quick overview of that as we're exploring JavaScript more and more. Stay tuned for more videos on JavaScript on my YouTube channel, but thanks so much and have a great day.